Hello there. We are so excited to start 2025 strong. And the question I get asked the most is, how do you manage so much content creation? The secret, repurposing with purpose. So inside this episode, I am breaking down my exact strategy for transforming a single piece of content like this into multiple valuable assets across different platforms. We are covering monthly goal setting, content pillars, creating a roadmap, and becoming a repurposing powerhouse. Plus, I'll share my favorite tools and templates for you to streamline this process, including using AI. So if you're ready to ditch the content overwhelm and get strategic, then let's dive in. Welcome back to this week's Pep Talk. I am so excited to talk about this topic because it is one of the top questions that I got asked in 2024. And that is, how do you use social media and how do you create so much content? So, okay, that's two questions, but I thought it would be fun to kick the year off with breaking down the details with a formula that you can follow and implement right now. So PS, before we get into this, I am teaching a free workshop inside our Crush the Rush Club open house. So it's totally free at the end of this month, where you can get this exact strategy, content repurposing, how we use social, the first module of Anti-Social School, and so much more. So if you DM me the link, I will send you a free ticket to this workshop. Or if you're already in the club, you can go ahead and grab the workshop on demand. So you can go to hollymariehaynes.com/club. Or if you would like to try it out for free, just shoot me a DM and I will gift you this whole workshop. So, okay, back to the question. How do I use social and how do I create content? I actually teach this quite a bit inside our club and our co-op, but I want to start with a story because I think sometimes we forget. I know I haven't forgotten, but I think sometimes if you're listening, you might forget like why the process came into place. And so when I started this business, I could not be on social all day. It was simply impossible. I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was working for the C-suite. My girls were in kindergarten. We were getting ready to experience COVID. It hadn't hit yet. And I just didn't, quite frankly, have time to post on social. Everyone was teaching to post like 10 times a day on Facebook and then 2 or 3 times a day on Instagram. And I was like, that's not a possibility. So for me, I had to figure out a different plan. I knew that I had to be visible and I had to figure out a way to be visible, but it couldn't be the way that everyone else was teaching because the time just didn't exist. Like it was impossible. So how do you do this? Well, at the time I had a coach and she was like, we got to think of a platform that you can share consistently on. And for me, and this is what I teach now, I like to think of what is your home base? What is a home base that you can be consistent with? You have heard me share this before. I started with a podcast. The podcast sounds a lot different now than it did 5 years ago, which is so crazy. We're about to hit our 500th episode, which means we've done over 100 episodes a year. But if you don't have a podcast, you can pick a piece of long form content, something that you can create consistently every single week. I have not missed a week in 5 years of this podcast. I have not missed a week in 5 years of sending out an email about the podcast. So there's something to say about the consistency of that. But now there are so many options between podcasts and blogs and private podcasts and Substacks and newsletters and YouTube videos. Like, just pick something that you're excited about. That's your first piece of homework. And then we're going to layer on the framework, which is where you're going to want to take notes. So around the 15th of every month, I sit down and revisit my goals for the next month. So as an example, this is airing in January. If I were listening now, I would use this framework for my February plan. That way we're not planning last minute and we have a little time to work on things. So I usually put it the 15th of every month, which is mid-month, because let's face it, the beginning and the end of the month get a little crazy. I don't know why. It just always happens that way. And so I like to just take the stress off and say, let's just do it mid-month when there's not as many things going on. So the first thing that I ask myself is, what is my goal for the month? So write this down. What is your goal for the month? As in, what do you want people to take action on? Are you launching something? If that's the focus, then we want to think about, what does that launch look like? If you aren't, let's think about what you're launching next and work backwards. What's the messaging, the education that's tying back into that launch? As an example, if you go back and listen to our podcast in October and November, their content is very much focused on leading you into our collective co-op. So we're talking about more strategic, more intense, more high-level topics. And now, because the co-op has closed, we're moving into a different set of topics that maybe are more aligned with our club because we're getting ready to relaunch our club, or maybe more aligned with Antisocial School when we relaunch Antisocial School. So you can literally see this framework come to life because I will start to talk about on the podcast what is coming. Like, you're going to be able to see what is coming. I just talked about the club at the beginning of this podcast because we have a club open house at the end of the month. And then we're going to be launching the club. So you can follow along as how I do this. So the first question I ask myself on the 15th or the middle of every month is, what are my goals? If I don't have a launch going on, what is that thing that's coming up so that I can start to create content that leads to that? Like, we're leaving breadcrumbs or leaving a path. And then the second step is, what are your key dates for the month? So key dates are you traveling? Do you have launch dates? Do your kids have school? This season is a season for not having a class on a random Monday. I joke that like our girls are always home, like they're never in school, basically January through May, because we have so many random holidays. But like, let's write those down, right? So what are the key dates for the month? List it out, all the things. So if you have a Google Doc, a planner, whatever you're doing, write these things out. Step 3 is, what are your core messaging ideas? So now we know what our goal is, what our key dates are, and now we're really thinking through, what are your core messaging ideas? So as an example, right now we're focusing on the Crush the Rush Club, which hopefully you caught that. But my core messaging notes go something like this, and I'm literally reading them from my exact notes. So I did a brain dump of this in the middle of December, and I listed out what are the core messaging ideas for January. And the first thing I wrote down was, not all memberships are created equal. The second thing I wrote down was 90 days strategy guide. And then the third thing I wrote down was, this is for you if your business is stagnant, stalled, you don't know what to do next, you've started and need to like restart, you need some energy, you need to be re-energized, and would also love a community of support. And then I wrote down direct access to experts. So these are my exact notes. They are not fully fleshed out. They are not full sentences. There are things spelled wrong, but I know from just 10 minutes of planning, thinking about what key dates are important, what goals I need to focus on, and what our core messages are, I can then start creating content in a way that's way more intentional. So basically what I just did was create my content pillars for the month with a really quick brainstorming session. So then what I do is I take it a step further and I ask myself, what are my current client challenges? So if you're thinking about, okay, I'm talking about launching this membership, I really need to understand what my current client challenges are, but we want to do it for the season, for the month, because it changes. Like, what you're struggling with now is going to be very different than what you're struggling with in the summer. So examples that I wrote down are, you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed by the new year, need a revenue plan and don't know what to focus on. Maybe want to hire a team, but not sure where to start. And how I came up with these was, 1, thought about the season. So this is like New Year specific. 2, I went back to data and really thought, like, what are my current clients asking? I just did a ton of calls with all of you for the co-op, and I just did a ton of one-on-ones. And so I can hear you asking me these questions, and it's like, okay, well, how can I solve those problems? Other things that you ask, how can I keep things simple and not overcomplicate them? Hopefully, this podcast episode is a great example of how you can do that. Really thinking about how you don't have time for technology or learning all these new things. And maybe you've downloaded a lot of courses and you haven't seen the results. And so you're craving a place where you can ask questions and get a real life person answering them. So those are my notes on, okay, well, what do people really want? What are my current clients? What are they struggling with? What are their challenges? And so now we have a really great little sheet of most of the time it's in a Google Doc for me. And then I move it into ClickUp of what are our goals, what are key dates that we're paying attention to, what are our core messaging, so coming up with our content pillars, and then what are our client challenges. And so I do this every single month, and then I start to create content. I don't just sit down and create content to create content, because now I have a map. Now I have a framework, and it's going to be really, really easy. And going back to my advice at the beginning, our starting point is the podcast. So for now, following this monthly map, I can map out 4 episodes like this one that's going to support our goal. And I know it's going to support our goal because this episode then gets repurposed into so many different places. And I want to make sure that if I have this robust system in place, that the right things are supporting the right goals. So you can kind of see how it all flows together. So now I have a plan, I have some organization, and now I have 4 podcast episodes. Let's just pretend there's 4 weeks in a month. And if you don't have a podcast, it could be a blog, an email, like whatever works for you. I write the titles of them, and then I think about how I want to repurpose it. I'm not writing the full episodes. I'm not writing all the content. I'm just really thinking about what do I intentionally want to talk about based on the plan that I just mapped out. So when I do start writing each episode, I have this sort of framework already in place, and then I follow the roadmap for repurposing. So my biggest action item and piece of advice here is to create your content repurposing roadmap. So this month, I want you to, 1, follow the plan that I just mapped out for you, and 2, create your content repurposing roadmap. When you create this long form content at the beginning of each week, where does it go, right? If you don't have a plan, you're going to just be winging it. And so what I'm saying is, let's have a plan, let's follow it. So as an example, this podcast episode currently goes to the following places. We create 2 blog posts out of it. One is a full blog post that we use AI to write, and the second is show notes. We create 3 Instagram posts. So 2 reels and 1 carousel post from this episode. One reel is a video from this podcast. I'm recording myself talking. That's easy peasy. The second is B-roll. So it's video saved on my phone with text overlaying it. It's all made from templates that we repeat every week. So now we're at 5 pieces of content. We then have 2 pieces of YouTube content. One is the actual video, same video that we're repurposing, and one is a YouTube short, which is the reel that we just talked about. So now we're at 7 pieces of content. We then create 2 pieces of content for Pinterest. One is a story pin, which is the reel repurposed. One is a blog post, which we just talked about. We have 2 LinkedIn posts, again, reusing the reel and the video. The other one is the carousel that's repurposed. And then we have 2 emails. I can create more emails pretty easily from a podcast episode. One email is our Sunday email that talks about this specific episode and gives you a very specific strategy tip to take. And the second email gets sent at the end of the month, and it's sort of like a compilation of all of our podcast episodes. So that example is 13 pieces of content that all come from this 10-minute monthly content planning session and about 20 minutes of content repurposing. I know it's a lot, but it's so easy because we have a plan that aligns with our goal. We have a roadmap, a repurposing roadmap that includes templates that we can easily repurpose every week. And if you go look at my Instagram, you can literally see this come to life. Like 95% of it is repurposed. And then I use AI and other tools to speed up the process. So we could do a full episode on this, and maybe we should, about the AI piece, but I put this entire episode into Gemini, and that's how I get the blog post and Instagram caption and reel ideas and more. And you can even ask Gemini to write a content plan for you. Like, there's so many cool things that you could do. The possibilities are endless. But the one thing that you can't ask AI to do is align your actions with your goals, which is why the first step is so key. So I really want you to take out a piece of paper today, and I want you to ask yourself, what are your goals for the next month? What are the key dates for the next month? What are your core messaging ideas for the next month? And then what are your client challenges for the next month? And then map out how you're going to repurpose your content from this one piece of content you're going to create every single week. It literally is that easy. And then we're following the plan. So the possibilities are endless. And I know this was like the fast track of how to do it. So I would love for you to come hang out with us inside the club where I talk about content repurposing. We're going to be teaching it live. And you could join us for free if you DM me and I will send you the link. You can check out the club at hollymariehaynes.com/club. And I have live office hours every single week where we're answering questions and making this very specific to you. Because like I say, it's not a one size fits all model. Hard to say fast. But I do hope that this inspires you to plan content differently. And just remember that we want our content to do the heavy lifting for us, to create the relationships, to help introduce you to future clients, and to share what you're amazing at. So if you're consistent with it and you pick a piece of content that you love creating and you've got the right plan in place and it's aligned with your goals, like literally it's magic. It will run your business so much differently and save you so much time.